we're trying to put you in control. You make the decisions. I don't care when you retire. You may never actually want to retire, but we want to be financially secure to afford to retire when we want. That's the goal.
When you need some advice, never sacrifice, always get it right. Ask the Planman. Finance, insurance, and more.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to Ask the Planman. I'm your host, Bruce Weinstein, and today we're going to start taking you on the components that make up your financial planning process. I believe everybody needs to have a financial plan in life, and we're going to start breaking down the different nuggets. I'm joined by my super extraordinary producer, Allie. Allie, welcome to Ask the Planman. What I want to talk about today, Allie, keep up, take some notes, get everybody writing down here. We're going to start breaking down the fundamentals and the components that go into the financial planning process. Now, why is that important? Well, the key I always talk about with the plan is it's a Polaroid in the film of life. Now, what the hell does that mean? Half of you don't even know what a Polaroid is. I'm showing my age. It's a picture. A financial plan's obsolete the second you do it. Just like, you know, when they say like the latest technology came out, by the time it comes out, it's already obsolete. There's something newer and better. It just hasn't been released yet, right? So your financial plan is just a snapshot. Life goes on. The markets are fluctuating. You're spending money. Money comes in. Money goes out. All we're trying to do in the financial plan is get a sense of the projection of where our client is heading and showing them their end destination. If they don't like where they're going, today's the first day they could take corrective action. So I liken it to when we were kids, you used to go to the lake or a pond or a stream and you used to skim rocks. Everybody can kind of visualize skimming a rock. And so that ripple effect from the rock shimming out on the water, skipping along, is creating this ripple effect and out into the lake. And so think of your plan, your destination, your journey is, well, you're on that trajectory. Wherever that stone's going, that's your path, Allie. This is where you're heading. Everything you're doing, unbeknownst to yourself or otherwise, this is where you're going. If you don't like where it's ending and taking you, today's the first day we could fix it. If it says you're going to run out of money at 57 years of age, well, that's a problem. If it says you're going to have tons and tons of money at age 107, well, that's a problem because maybe you underutilized your money. Right? So let's start to break down what I like to call some of the core concepts. And I'm going to put a teaser out there, Allie. We're going to start bringing out some of my webinars. And this is going to be some of the stuff we're going to dive a little bit deeper into in the webinars, and we're going to bring it all together. So I'm going to give them some nuggets today. We're going to talk about certain topics. And then ultimately they want to have interests. We'll put in the show notes, links to the webinars they're going to start doing. They're going to be free. We're going to break them into sections, 2-3 webinars, breaking down the financial planning journey for people on a bigger scale, and they can come in, ask questions, and we'll be live. So let's start where the basics in the beginning. I start with people, and I may have said it in previous episodes, but we're going to bring it in here. Is there's 3 things you can control. The key to your financial planning success is understanding these 3 areas and prioritizing. And so let's start with what they are. First thing you can control is your timeline to retirement. We're going to use retirement. That's the biggest one everybody wants to solve for. So the first thing you can control is your timeline. Everybody picks a date and age. This is their goal, their fantasy. We talk about their woody woofy. What do you want for yourself? I want to retire at 60. I want to retire at 62. I want to retire at 55. Okay, great. What do you need to have happen? Well, the second thing you have to have control over, or you can control, is your spending, your budget. And we've touched on episodes. We have episodes about budgeting, the importance of budgeting. That's the gas to your car, man. Your car's not going to go anywhere without electricity or gasoline or whatever your car of the day is these days. So your financial plan, life doesn't go on without money. So you need a budget. So you can control the amount of money you save, and you can control the amount of money you spend. So your timeline, the amount of money you spend and or save. And the third thing you have control over is your rate of speed, your rate of return on your assets. If you're a nervous Nelly and you're a CD investor and you're only buying, 1, 2, 5 year CDs and making 3, 4, 5%, your journey is going to take a little bit longer. You maybe have to make some sacrifices. You may not be able to spend as much as you had hoped. You may have to work longer. Conversely, if you're an equity investor, if you're a real estate investor, you're making double-digit returns for a 30, 40, 50-year period. That's going to accelerate the growth of your money beyond just the savings. Does that make sense so far?
Yep, I got it.
Now, the question then becomes, which of these is non-negotiable? Because you can't always impact and influence and have all of them convey. And that's usually where the conversation then gets more challenging with the client is we're going to plug in their goals and objectives. We're going to plug in their fantasy budget, their fantasy retirement age, and an assumed rate of return that they feel comfortable pursuing. And we're going to throw the stone in the water and we're going to see where the ripples take them. And that's what the crunching of the numbers does. And it's going to say, well, here's what you got, Allie. It's based on this amount of money saved, this timeline, this rate of return. You either will or won't make your goals or objectives. You're going to run out of money at this age. You're, whatever. And so more times than not in my 38 years is we have to tinker. We have to go back in and we have to play with the numbers. And so when I say to you, which of them are non-negotiable? Well, let's start with the budget. Somebody who makes $5,000 a month wants to have $5,000 a month in retirement. Well, what if the budget they have with inflation and the rate of return and their timeline comes in and says, well, we can only give you $4,000? Is that a negotiable or a non-negotiable? Are you willing to reduce? If you want to retire, make up an age, you want to retire at 60 and you want to have $5,000 a month of tax-free income and just pick a rate of return, a modest rate of return. Well, you can have the timeline, you could have the modest rate of return, but you can't get $5,000. You can only get $4,000. Well, what's the client going to say? Right? Is that a non-negotiable? No, I got to have 5,000. Okay. So 5,000 is the driving force. Well, then what do you need to do? Maybe I need to work a little bit longer, or I need to raise the rate of return on my money, or I need to fund more into my savings, which is back to budget, right? Because the amount of money you save and the amount of money you spend are correlated. So if you and Glenn are only able to save $1,000 a month for your retirement, and I come back to you and say, Allie, in order for you to have what you want at age 60, you need to save $2,000 a month. Well, we don't have $2,000 a month, right? So all of a sudden, that's not an option. I can't fund more into that goal. That becomes a non-negotiable. I can't save anymore. So now we're back to, well, maybe you need to work till 62. And so we tweak the numbers and we plug in 62 and the 5,000 budget and the same rate of return, and voila, there you go. So your non-negotiable was your retirement cash flow. So now instead of retiring at 60, 62. Now, is that the worst end all? No, maybe not. But again, it's data, right? It's data. This is information. So I don't know how old you are. Do you want to say it? Do you want to tell me how old you are? Do you care that people know? No?
Mid-30s.
30s. So she's got time, folks, right? So if she's in her 30s and she wants to retire at 60, she's got 25, 30 years to get there. So a lot can happen in that point in time. Allie, do you think your income's going to go up in the next 35 years from where it is today?
Well, I hope so.
Yeah. Right? I mean, it's assumable that it would. Allie, would you be committed or interested in retiring at 60 and having to boost your savings as you start to make more money? Would you be agreeable to put more money away down the road as you start making it?
Oh, I mean, adding more to my retirement accounts as I'm making more?
Right.
Yes.
Right. So again, we're making up a scenario. We're saying you can only save $1,000. We're saying you need to save $2,000. Right. So your initial goal to retire at 60 was not accomplishable without you putting more money in. That's today. That's the Polaroid. That's the picture and the snapshot. 5 years from now, your income's available to throw in that extra $1,000 we talked about. Now, you lost 5 years, but now we go back, we plug in the numbers, and all of a sudden, you can retire at 61 instead of 62. Okay. Again, we're trying to put you in control. You make the decisions. I don't care when you retire. You may never actually want to retire, but we want to be financially secure to afford to retire when we want. That's the goal. Now, you're self-employed. We're self-employed. Unless my boss is a total jerk off, where am I going? Like, I'm the boss. You're the boss. So, it's different than a corporate job or some kind of municipality or, where they age you out or, you just got to get your pension and number of years of service and you want out the door. And that's where I worked with a ton of people over the years is, people in corporate America or municipals, that had a timeline. They wanted to get out at 60, 62, 65. And hey, can I afford to take my pension and my Social Security? Right. So, a self-employed might have a different, viewpoint. But to me, the whole context starts with the three things you can control. All right. So just recap it. So again, it's your timeline. It's the amount of money you save or spend, i.e. your budget today, the amount of money you could save today, and your budget in retirement, factoring in inflation, right? Cost of living adjustment, COLAs. And then the rate of return. So again, you may say, you know what? I could probably raise my portfolio risk. I've only been moderate. I'm in my 30s. Maybe I'm being too conservative. Again, it's not for me to make the determination. It's for me to give you the data. But if a 7% rate of return doesn't get you there at 60, but a 9% rate of return does, would you contemplate raising your risk profile to strive to make 9%, which adds to your volatility? It's going to have some setbacks along the way that might be more severe than a 7%, right? But over time, you should be making that 9%. You got 35 plus years. Wham. Here we go. Get my crystal ball going and wind up. And here we are in the future. And now you're 60 and you made your 9%. You saved your $1,000 a month. You're 60 years of age. All the money's there for you. Now you're in control. Do you want to retire with that $5,000 a month? Maybe I do, maybe I don't. But that's the journey. Now, I probably won't be here in 35 years when you're 25 years when you're punching out, but you get the point is, that's the plan. The plan's a Polaroid. You're going to take new pictures every year. You're going to assess your journey and then you're going to tweak and you're going to tweak and you're going to tweak. We did episode a little bit while back about rebalance, right? New year, rebalance, same thing. It's moderating your risk. It's adjusting your risk. That make sense?
Yep.
Any questions from the young yuppie?
No, I think you're covering it pretty well. And the only thing that might be a little bit of a curveball in here is people who want to retire early, people who want to retire maybe in their 50s.
Well, look, I'm all for it. It's all about capability, right? Desire is one thing, capability is another. So if your Woody Woofy is to retire at 55 and you're in your mid 30s or early 30s, well, you've got, let's just say you're 35, you got 20 years versus 65, you have 30 years. So that could lead into, let's talk about the rule of 72 and the power of compounding, which is another one of our topics for this episode. So the rule of 72, if you take the number 72, this is your old math, not numerators and denominators or whatever they are, but 72 is the top number and you divide it by another number. And let's say for math purposes, it's 8. 8 goes into 72 how many times? The answer is 9, right? So the rule of 72 says if I make 8% on my money is going to double every 9 years. So you pick your interest rate, could be 6%. If I make 6%, 12 years, my money is going to double. If I use 4%, 18 years, going to double. If inflation's at 4%, Rule 72 says my expenses are going to double in 18 years. So we've got some high inflation these days. I don't know if 4% is the magic number. Historically, 5%. Post-World War II, inflation was 5%. The last 15, 20 years, we've had virtually no inflation, quote unquote. I don't buy it. We have. My ice cream container is not a half a gallon anymore. Read the label. It's 3/4 of a half a gallon. Like, what is 3/4? It's a quart and a half. It's the same price. No inflation. My 8-pack of hot dogs went to 7. It's now 6. They still sell 8 packs of buns. I'm always got extra buns because I don't have enough hot dogs in the package anymore. But they didn't raise the price of my Hebrew National hot dogs. Right? And they report no inflation. But I digress. Rule of 72 says if I'm chasing inflation of X, how much does my money have to grow to outpace inflation and put more money in my pocket? And so if I'm doing my planning, I'm chasing inflation and I'm using a number and I got the rule of 72 I'm chasing or is chasing me. And then I have to get a rate of return on my money. And so if I make 8%, my money is going to double every 9 years. And inflation at 4% is going to double every 18. So I'm going to outpace. I'll be able to grow. My money will, become larger than my spend. And over time, I'll have hopefully what I need. Okay. So when we're doing the 3 things you can control and we're plugging in, well, the rule of 72 comes into play because we said earlier, if you went from 7% to 9%, your money doubles every 10 years versus every 8 years. Well, a younger person has an extra, I use the term camel hump. If you're listening to audio, I'm doing my little mountain, my Alps here, is you got the camel humps. And the camel hump is every time your money doubles. And there's one of these, I don't know if they're considered a joke, but Allie, would you rather have $5 million or 1 penny that doubles every day for 30 days? What would you take?
I've read this before, and I don't remember what the math turned out into.
You take the penny. You take the penny. I mean, so it's so glaring. 5 million. Here's $5 million, or I'll give you a penny, and the penny's going to compound and double every day. So it's 30 camel humps. So if you think about that, every day for 30 days, it's going to double. So 1 becomes 2, 4, 8, on and on and on. Well, all of a sudden, the law of large numbers, 32,000 becomes 64,000, is 128,000, is 256,000, 512. All of a sudden, 512 is $1 million, 2 million, 4 million, 8 million, right? So the 30-day compounding blows past the $5 million lump sum. So that is why the rule of 72 is so important when you're looking at and forecasting your budget, your lifestyle, the amount of money you're going to leave behind to your heirs, your spouse, all this stuff. Look, none of this is easy nor simple. It's complex because it's layered. It's deep. And that's where I talk about, that's why I have the show, is because a lot of people deal superficially on certain things, but they're not into the complexity and understanding all the other variables that they're not dealing with or they're not addressing. And so this is another one of those. So when people say, oh, my money's in my 401k, I don't know what it's doing. Well, do you know what kind of return you're getting? Do you know what kind of risk you're taking? Do you know what your standard deviation is? Do you know what your beta and alpha is? It's all Charlie Brown's teacher. Want. They don't know. There's nobody in their job that's giving them this information. They don't deal with a financial advisor because they don't have any money to work on Main Street of the Wall Street firms. Their money's in their 401k and they retire, 401k millionaires and they have no idea what just happened. And that's where my bread and butter was helping people understand how to manage that money while they're working and making sure it's diverse and properly obtaining the returns on a risk-adjusted basis. But HR doesn't give that to corporate employees. There's, rare, again, I can't unilaterally say it doesn't happen, but, is AT&T bringing in financial advisors to sit down with 30,000 employees and go through their 401k risk models? I don't think so. I just don't think corporate America is doing it. Merck, Exxon, are they doing that? Does Walmart do that? I don't think so. So people are on their own devices, which is why we say you don't know if you don't know what you don't know, Allie. That's why you can keep watching my show. You got to keep coming back because we're trying to give you the stuff, folks. You could apply it. If you're not getting it, here it is. Go back and look at our other episodes. So the rule of 72, inflation is important. We've had a recent movement in interest rates, kind of good, kind of not. Goes hand in hand with inflation. Interest rates went up because inflation went up. What would you rather have? You want low inflation and low interest rates or high inflation and high interest rates? I'll take low inflation and low interest rates and good equity markets and good real estate markets and increase wealth that way. Nobody wants inflation. Inflation's not a good thing, but you need to budget. And in somebody in their mid 30s who's going to live, God willing, 60 plus years. Can you forecast me what inflation is going to be for you over the next 60 years? Do you plug in 3%? Do you plug in 4%? I'm a child of the 60s. I grew up as a teenager in the 70s. Okay. Car loans, house loans, mortgage rates, CD rates, everything was double digits. You can buy 14% CDs, but mortgage rates are 18 and 22%.
You can hardly figure out what the inflation is going to be in a year from now. It's been so wild recently.
Right. And are we truly given accurate data? Gas prices doubled. So let's take a tangent. CPI, Consumer Price Index. Consumer Price Index doesn't include energy. Gas prices went from $1.50, $1.80 to over $3. Some markets $5. We all went to $5 for a window there, came back into the threes. I barely see in South Florida, it'll dip under 3 for a half an hour and then come right back up. I just saw a 7% move overnight the other day. I'm like, it was just under 3. Now it's 3.25. I'm like, that's like 7%. Like, what happened? Like, what stimulated that? What created that? So, it's a moving target, right? And what we said, it's a Polaroid. It's obsolete the second you took the picture. So your inflation today is different than next week, is different than a month from now. Is the Fed raising rates, lowering rates, forecasting? Like, what are they doing? So the problem is for the younger generation, if you're using a financial plan and you need to calculate inflation, you can't underestimate based upon your adulthood. Your adulthood, my kids are in their early 30s. My kids don't know anything but near zero interest rates and near zero inflation. For the last 20 years, we've had plummeted interest rates to eventually hitting a head at, under 3% 30-year mortgage rates, right? Which are back to in the 6s, hit 7s. I think got close to 8. If it didn't hit 8, it was close to 8. We're pulled back a little bit. But that's the stuff when I was buying my first home. My first mortgage was 11% in 1986. And eventually came down. We refinanced, moved, upgraded. But we were thrilled to get 7% mortgage rates back then in the 90s. Now people blanch. I don't want 7%. Well, compared to what it was 35 years ago, it's pretty cheap money, but not when 2 years ago it was 2.75. Yeah. So your frame of reference is dictating decision making. And so now put the inflation in that conversation because you're used to such low inflationary numbers, at least reportable. And the reality is it's a false prophecy, right? Because again, I'm jokingly saying like my cereal box got less volume. My half gallon of ice cream isn't a half gallon of ice cream. And so the CPI is being manipulated to not really put the true factor. If my half gallon of ice, I'm an ice cream person, if you couldn't tell. So if I'm buying my Breyer's ice cream and I don't know what the number is, it's $4 for a half a gallon. Now, I usually only BOGO them, but it's Ben and Jerry's, really. That's what I like. They're pints. So you BOGO the Ben and Jerry's, they're 2 for $5, right? Well, that's not good because they're not a half gallon. So go back to my Breyers. So if it's $4 and now all of a sudden the price is still $4, but I look down and the container's smaller and it's 1.5 quarts. I have 25% less ice cream. The price didn't change. But that's not reported to CPI. That's a 25% price increase. That's not inflation. That's not reportable. No. Wasn't reported. And so all those consumer goods, the cereal boxes, the hot dog packages, the ice cream, this was all done a few years back during the Obama administration. All this was going on. CPI was reported, I think, 2 years in a row to be zero. We had no inflation for a couple years. This is like during the housing crisis, right? It's all during that stuff. But clearly the food companies made more. They cut the volume down. But why was this important? Well, ergo to my retirees, your Social Security check, your increases to your Social Security payment is predicated on CPI. If CPI is 2, you get half of the CPI as an increase to your Social Security check. So if inflation's running at 4%, you're going to get a 2% increase on your Social Security check next year to offset. They're not giving you dollar for dollar. They're giving you half. But for 2 years, in my opinion, the government manipulated CPI to be zero. So they didn't have to give for 2 years the seniors. I mean, that's a huge audience. That's a lot of money. I don't know how much money Social Security kicks out every day, every month, every year. But you put a 2 or 3% increase on it year after year after year. Where's the debt going? Where's the budget? The fiscal budget for the country, like yada, yada. So all of a sudden for a couple of years, we don't have to give them an increase. All right. So what's my point? My point is, how do you, in somebody making their financial plan, what the heck do you do? What do you use? If you can't rely on the numbers of a CPI to be truly properly reported, which has happened, how does Allie and Glenn forecast the next 60 years of their life? And what numbers do you use? And so, you got to be responsible for you. If you're relying on the government numbers and 3% CPI and your gas doubled, well, that's BS then, isn't it? Because gas isn't included in there. And I drive to work every day and I got to pay twice as much for my gas than I used to. Right? Where's that money going to come from? So I'm on these tangents, but it all ties in. Am I making sense?
Yeah, no, I'm following.
Allie's my mainstream listener. If Allie doesn't understand it, I'm in trouble, right? Like I got to make sure people understand what I'm talking about. All right, so we're getting at the half-hour mark, so we're going to wrap it up here. So we started doing some episodes here, breaking down the components that go into proper planning, strategic planning. How do you start to put together your financial plan? We spent a good amount of time on the 3 things you can control: the amount of money you spend versus the amount of money you save, your timelines for retirement, the rate of return that you're going to strive for throughout your savings years and beyond, and how they all correlate and what you want to do now, which of them are non-negotiable, how do you hold yourself accountable to those non-negotiables and adjust and modify, take a new Polaroid every year, constantly assess and evaluate. Now, tied to that, we talked about the rule of 72. More importantly, I think out of that component was inflation, because that's the anchor, right? That's the problem. If inflation's at 4% year after year after year after year, and I get more and more conservative on my investing, I can't afford for my investments to be net tax, net inflation to be negative. Like I'll be going backwards, right? I'll be running out of money. So these are all things that you need to be in tune to. All right. So Next episode, we'll get into more of these details. We're going to talk about your lines crossing, your X factor. We'll talk about your asset allocation again a little bit more. We'll tie all those components in. And don't forget, check the show notes for when we release this. We're going to start doing some live webinars. You come on the show. We're going to talk about putting the planning together in a more structured concept. We'll take your questions. So, Allie, thanks for joining me. As always, I love having you with me in the studio here. Folks, if you need some advice, always get it right. Come ask the Plan Man. I need your help. I need you to like, share, subscribe. Go to planman.tv. Go to our website, asktheplanman.com. You can hit me up at 844-PLANMAN. Bruce at asktheplanman.com. Just Google us, find us, Instagram. We're everywhere. Want to keep the show growing. Need to grow the audience. We don't take advertisements. We're not pushing products. We're just here to help and give you solid advice. You could do it yourself, get the help that you need. So until next time, thanks for joining us. And again, if you need some advice, always get it right. Come ask the Plan Man. Allie, thank you. We'll see you next time.